Well, what a week it's been. Charlotte Ivers, Times Radio political correspondent, is here with me. Charlotte, I don't know where to pick from all those clips. Let's go back to the beginning of the week. Monday. Monday was meant to be like a reset day, wasn't it? It was the sort of Sue Gray non-report report, the report that we've all been waiting for, but without any of the bits. I mean, I have to say, when I read it, I thought, is this it? Is this sort of... where are all the details that people were promised of what had actually gone on? But regardless of the report, Monday, that statement by the Prime Minister in Parliament was meant to be the sort of drawing a line under it and moving on. But, I mean, it's had the complete reverse effect.
Well, the good news is that isn't it. As soon as the Metropolitan Police have finished their inquiries into the parties in Downing Street, the full report will be released and you'll get all of the gory details that you were hoping for in that interim report.
I just want to know what happened. I don't care if it's gory or not. Just like what actually took place.
Well, we will find out. We just don't know when. It could be a very long time indeed. In terms of the reset, yes, you're completely right. That statement in the House of Commons did not help Boris Johnson in the way he might have hoped it did. We've had lots of MPs since put in their votes of no confidence in him. He had about 3 a couple of days ago in one day, all across the parliamentary party as well. You've got some new MPs, you've got some old MPs, some Brexiteers, some Remainers. It really is across the whole spectrum of Conservative MPs. You have people losing confidence in him now.
And do you think that it was all down to that one poorly chosen sort of riposte from the Prime Minister to the Leader of the Opposition, where he accused Keir Starmer of prosecuting journalists but failing to prosecute Jimmy Savile? Now, we know that he was advised not to use that comment. He went ahead and used it anyway. A lot of anger from across the House, even from supporters of his. But in the meeting of the 1922 committee, or the meeting of the backbenchers later that day, he said, I get it, I will fix it. He reassured them, he left the room. I mean, were you outside the room?
I was outside the room, and
what was the atmosphere?
Well, it's a bit of an odd one, and it's a very arcane Westminster tradition, but bear with me because it does tell us something. So What happens with these meetings is all the journalists crowd around in the corridor outside the room as the MPs go in. You try and chat to them. Most of them, let's be honest, aren't up for a huge amount of chat at that point because they're in front of about 20 odd people. So it's a bit odd to do it anyway. And then they go in and they make noise. They bang the tables and they go rah, 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 when the Prime Minister walks in. And the aim of that is to show the journalists outside how much support the Prime Minister has. And we all sit there basically taking the temperature of that noise
with
and
a
working
decibel
out.
meter.
I actually saw one journalist who genuinely had a decibel meter with him in the parliamentary press gallery the other day. It's all getting very technical, but it's all a bit silly, but it does tell you if the MPs are trying to show journalists they support the Prime Minister. That is the one thing you can learn. And tell you what, it was eerily quiet. There was a little bit of noise made, but it was really, really quiet, far quieter than I'd expected. And that is a sign of something. That is a sign that MPs are not going out of their way to show their support for Boris Johnson.
But in that meeting, whatever Boris Johnson said seemed to have sufficed, because remember, that day was the sort of the make or break Sue Gray report day. Then we had PMQs on Wednesday. We had, I would say, a sort of almost like back to politics PMQs. It was less about parties. It was more about costs of living. It was more about sort of the cut and thrust of politics, if I can use that phrase. But then the week seemed to have got worse and worse from Boris Johnson, culminating yesterday in losing 5 of his advisors now. 4 yesterday, 1 today.
1 today, that's completely correct. So he lost these advisors for a variety of reasons. The first one, Munira Muniz, who was his head of policy and who has worked for him in various guises for over 14 years, resigned over that Jimmy Savile comment. Boris Johnson, by that point, had clarified his comment, but he didn't apologise. And Munira Muniz said that she wanted him to apologise, and because he hadn't done so, she was resigning. And she ended her letter by saying, it's not too late for you, it is too late for me.
What do you think it is about that resignation, that the statement of saying sorry with Boris Johnson? Because quite clearly that interview he gave to clarify his comments must have been planned by his office, where he was going to apologise, but he distinctly failed to do so. He didn't say, I'm sorry. He didn't say, I got it wrong. He said, I said what I said, and I sort of stand by it because Keir Starmer himself said that his office failed to investigate, to carry out the investigations needed for Jimmy Savile. I mean, what do you think it is about Boris Johnson? Has he just got an inherent disability to say the words, I am sorry? He can say it about other things, but he can't take personal responsibility.
If you speak to people who know Boris Johnson well, they would completely agree with that assessment. He does not like apologising, and he actually has had to apologise quite a lot recently. Think of, for example, the apology that he gave on Monday. The concern that his MPs have is that it takes a long, long time. Apologising really is the last resort for Boris Johnson, and they believe that because of that, they are ending up in way more political trouble than they would be if he just came out the minute there was a negative news story and said, you know what, I'm sorry, we're done. Let's move on.
So he lost one of his, I think she was one of his closest and time-served longest advisors. She was with him in City Hall when he was Mayor of London. And also her resignation letter, quite a personal tone in that resignation letter. The other people he's lost, a lot of MPs have come up to the defence of the Prime Minister saying, well, this is exactly what he promised us in that room that you were standing outside of, Charlotte, in the 1922 committee, a reset in Downing Street. I'm going to clear out the people who stupidly allowed parties to go ahead in Downing Street, and this is what he's doing. Bizarrely enough, a lot of the tweets that supporting MPs put out did have that sort of essence of copy paste to them. So perhaps it was a message that was put out there to be circulated.
That's very cynical of you, Alexis.
It is a little bit.
It?
But when you notice that it's exactly the same wording from every MP, then it's problematic.
Yes, I think we can probably say that was a centrally coordinated effort. And the Prime Minister had said that he was going to get a grip on Downing Street, make big changes. Well, certainly we've seen big changes in the last 24 hours. Could have been handled better, I have to say, if that was the aim. Possibly one of the reasons it wasn't handled better is because the first person to go was the Director of Communications. So maybe that's why the communications around this were rather blurred, and we ended up with a series of panicked tweets from MPs rather than a statement of what was happening. So the people he has now lost, obviously his head of policy, we've spoken about her already. Jack Doyle, his Director of Communications, went as well. He said he'd always been intending to go after 2 years and that the last few weeks had taken a big strain on his personal life. Then he also lost Dan Rosenfield, his Chief of Staff, not a man implicated in any parties, but someone who a lot of Tory MPs think does not have a grip on the place and is quite bad at making political decisions. So he is gone now, and that will be a bit of a bone thrown to Conservative MPs. Then we lost Martin Reynolds. Martin Reynolds is the Prime Minister's, or was the Prime Minister's, principal private secretary. We will know him better as the man who sent that 100-person email inviting everyone to bring their own booze to the Downing Street Christmas summer party. Sorry, get confused. There are so many of them to tell between. And then as well, there was a policy advisor in Munira Muniz's department who went this morning as well. And this is all being sold by Downing Street sources as part of a major reshuffle, as part of a consensual decision between the PM and these advisors to make changes within the building.
Of course, alongside all of that, there are some seismic news away from Partygate and the difficulties the Prime Minister has in, asserting his authority. And that's, the news that Britons are facing the biggest drop in living standards, bigger than what we experienced in the financial market crash of 2008. People are going to be faced with an enormous price hike, not in just their mortgages, their national insurance contributions, prices of food, their energy bills, of course. What did you make of the Chancellor's press conference yesterday, Rishi Sunak? Just to quickly put aside things to do with the Prime Minister, how unusual is it for a member of the Cabinet, essentially the second most powerful person in the country, the Chancellor, to say something along the lines of Rishi Sunak said that when he came to the Jimmy Savile comments, I wouldn't have used those words myself, I think is what he said. It's the first time we've heard Dominic Raab, Deputy Prime Minister, say, well, it's all part and cut and thrust of the of politics. We heard Nadine Dorries, Culture Secretary, there in that clip that we played earlier. The Prime Minister always tells the truth. How significant are the Rishi Sunak comments?
There's always a risk, isn't there, in one of these leadership situations of reading so much into every word said by every politician in public. Having said that, people like Rishi Sunak are watching their every word at the moment, and he will have thought through the answers to that question. It was a very obvious question for him to have to answer. So I think that was deliberate. That was him telling us that he is different to Boris Johnson, while remaining studiously loyal in all other ways. That was a message to Conservative MPs and Conservative members saying, I am like him, I'm going to stay loyal to him, but just so you know, I'm a little bit more sensible and I watch my words. So, yes, I think that was reasonably significant given how loyal other cabinet ministers are being in public.
And he used a sort of almost like a double entendre of this is not my kind of party. And of course, the word party is so loaded now at the moment. Of course, he was probably talking about the Conservative Party, or was he? But let's look at what he has been promising. I think it's about £9 billion worth of help going out to people who need it the most. Now, of course, there are people who've criticised the help that he's given. Of the £350 that people are going to receive, some people are going to receive 200 of that. That's been labelled as a rebate. It's not quite a rebate because people are going to be paying that back. How have his proposals landed with the party faithful first, Charlotte? Is the Conservative Party happy with what the Chancellor has brought forward?
It's a very mixed bag, to be honest. Some MPs are just happy to see their constituents getting help and to have a solution to all of the emails in their inboxes around people's concerns about energy prices. Other MPs are deeply unhappy. One stood up in the House of Commons chamber after Rishi Sunak's statement and asked him if he was a socialist, which obviously, coming from a Tory MP, particularly one on the right, is not a huge compliment. And what he meant by that was that Rishi Sunak is doing a lot of giving people money, taking money back off people, moving things around. So you've got rebates, you've got handouts, you've also got a council tax rebate as well. That's a lot of state intervention. This MP was saying, hang on, if you want money back in people's pockets, just get rid of the national insurance rise. Yeah. That will give money back to people. That's a lot simpler. That's ideologically what we all came into politics to do. So a very mixed bag in terms of the reception.
Why do you think, in your view, this most obvious one of the measures that Rishi Sunak could take, I mean, it would be perfectly acceptable for him to say, in view of the Ofcom cap, or not Ofcom, Ofgem cap, I beg your pardon, and the heating bills rising so much, we are going to postpone the national insurance hike, not get rid of it, but we're going to push it back a year. It's so simple and easy. Why is he not doing it?
My understanding is, from the conversations I've had with people behind the scenes, that Rishi Sunak wants to see taxes falling next year.
Right, so closer to the election.
Exactly. So he needs to raise them now if he's going to raise them at all. That seems to be where his thinking is. Okay.
Do you think we're going to see some more resignations from Downing Street today? I mean, it's still, Friday, about 2:30, so there's still time. And have we already heard about reappointments? These people are going, who's replacing them?
We've heard about one reappointment, and that is for the Prime Minister's head of policy. The head of policy is now an MP, Andrew Griffiths. He was elected at the last election, past the 2019 intake. He's been the Prime Minister's parliamentary private secretary, so his eyes and ears in Parliament, essentially. And he is known for having essentially donated the Prime Minister his massive Westminster townhouse for the leadership campaign to use as his offices. They're reasonably close. He will be an interesting appointment, clearly an attempt to get the MPs on side by having one of their own in the building. Mixed reviews, I have to say, of him from MPs. A lot of them have spoken to me about him in his role as parliamentary private secretary, saying, hang on, he's meant to listen to our concerns and try and get help from the PM. Well, actually, it's more like he's spying on us and then reporting us to the PM as dissenters. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes down long term. As for the others, they haven't been replaced yet. And these are big gigs.
I was going to say that the head of communications for Downing Street, I mean, that is a huge role. And we have no idea who's going to be taking that over.
No idea. No idea about the chief of staff, who is the political head of the building. No idea about the principal private secretary. Sorry, many different acronyms of PPS in that building. The principal private secretary is the civil service head of that building, so we don't know about that either. And yes, down to policy advisors as well.
And how much leeway does Boris Johnson have right now? Do these, filling those spaces, that must be something that's urgently needs to be put in place. Not just that, but the people that need to be put in place need to be seen to be the people that can fix all the issues. Because let's not forget, as we mentioned at the beginning of our chat, these resignations, others have pointed out that they're not resignations. The Prime Minister is being showing his human kindness and allowing people to resign. but these are all part of the Prime Minister ousting people in order to sort of have a reset. So how quickly does he need to get on with this reset before the crowds become restless again?
Pretty quickly, I would say. At the moment, that building really has got no leading people in it. Everybody has resigned. One interesting aside, I would say, all the senior people who are left now, almost to a man and woman, are Carrie Simon's people. They are friends of the Prime Minister's wife. That is quite interesting because there was always that talk, wasn't there, about the fight in Downing Street between City Hall and the Dominic Cummings group and Carrie Simons and her group of people. Well, now there's only one team left standing from that. That's quite interesting and won't go down well with some Conservative MPs. Boris Johnson needs to get those roles filled. It'll be interesting to see what he does with them. Another aside, in that meeting that I was spying on outside the other day in Parliament, Boris Johnson told Conservative MPs that Lynton Crosby, the man who is credited with winning David Cameron his 2015 election campaign, was coming back to advise him. Well, our colleague Tom Newton-Dunn got in touch with someone who knows Lynton Crosby a couple of days ago, and it turns out that is the first Lynton Crosby heard of it. He is in Australia with his family.
Interesting. I think that's a wonderful point to leave it. Charlotte, as always, thank you for your time. Charlotte Ivers there, our political correspondent. You can read more, of course,